The Taming of Coyote, Chapter 3. The sun peeked sleepily over the horizon. It rose slowly. What rush was there? It would get there, eventually. The people of Turn were another story. Out belted the cockcrow, farm after farm. The roosters alerted all living things to rise and become active. The day was beginning, and there was work to be done. The morning was relatively cool. Dew still rested on the crops, and a gentle breeze floated through the air. The world was alive. "Sonia!" Aunt Esther called. "Sonia, don't dally, girl!" Her buckets clanged together as she carried them. She looked about and scrunched up her face. "Sonia!" "I'm here," Sonia replied as she skipped beside her aunt. "Sorry." "Did you get distracted again?" Aunt Esther sighed. "Get your head out of the clouds. There's work to do." "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry." Aunt Esther handed Sonia a large basket. "Now make yourself useful and get the eggs from the hen house. Try and count the chickens while you're at it. There have been coyote sightings the last few nights." "Coyote sightings?" Sonia gasped and stammered. "Big ones, too," Aunt Esther assured. "They'd better stay away from here. Your Uncle Homer will shoot 'em dead between the beastly eyes." "Coyotes?" "Oh, for heaven's sake, child, get going! You don't have to worry about coyotes in the daytime. Now hop to it!" Sonia stood in the hen house. For the third time, she counted every chicken on the in and outside. Not a one was missing. No sign of disturbance was apparent. No word had yet come from the field. That meant that there were no goats down. Uncle Homer hadn't even come back for his shotgun. The matter was rather confusing. Sonia puzzled over it as she went about collecting the eggs. The coyote had been on the property. She had seen it with her own two eyes. There was no telling how long it had been there either. Yet not a thing had been touched or disturbed. So what was it doing there? Was it passing through after raiding another farm? Perhaps it wasn't necessarily a hunt. Perhaps one of the neighbors' dogs was in heat. That coyote was a big one. At that size, Sonia wouldn't doubt that it was male. The rooster let out a loud crow outside. He had done his job. Everyone was awake, and the chickens had laid fresh eggs. He was ready for his breakfast. Sonia let out a grunt. It seemed that everyone was always ordering her around and telling her what to do. It was a real pain. Even the animals bossed her around. Some life. She went about her chores. While Aunt Esther milked the goats and cows, Sonia hurried about her duties. She slopped the pigs, threw grain for the chickens, and swept the porch. Aunt Esther did the laundry, but Sonia was the one to hang it on the line to dry while Aunt Esther made lunch. Sonia hummed a little tune to herself as she sorted through the wet clumps of linen. She stood on her tippy toes as she started up one sheet. It took a little effort. She was much shorter than Aunt Esther, after all. She was confident that it would prove no challenge, however, in another year or so. She was about due for another growth spurt. Once the other end of the sheet was fastened, she stepped back. She leaned down to grab another piece of laundry. A gentle breeze flapped the sheet softly. Sonia suddenly noticed something, and she lifted her head to take a good look. Sitting only a few feet from her was a large, unique coyote. She let out a startled scream and fell backwards. "Sonia!" Aunt Esther called. Her voice carried out the open window. "Are you all right? What's wrong?" Sonia trembled as she stared at the coyote. He was definitely male, but he was unlike any coyote that she had ever seen before. He was a dark, rusty red, but thin, zigzag stripes, like streaks of black lightning, wrapped around his body. His muzzle was long, and jagged, sharp teeth poked out, almost like a crocodile. His eyes were dark, but the actual eyes were yellow in color, rather than the normal white. The green irises glittered in the sunlight. He had a heavy smell of good clean dirt, dried blood, and plain dirty clay. He cocked his head to the side and examined her. He then lifted his hind leg and began to scratch behind his ear with content. "Sonia?" "Oh, I'm fine, Aunt Esther," she called back. "A frog hopped out of the grass and it startled me." "You silly girl," the old woman huffed as she continued her cooking. Sonia sat up and watched the coyote carefully. He yawned, and he watched her in return. "What are you doing here?" she scolded him in a whisper. "If anyone sees you here, they'll shoot you. You can't be here." The coyote let out a groan and stood up. He padded past her, as if she wasn't even any of his concern, or present for that matter, and raised his head towards the window. On his feet, if Sonia didn't know better, she could have easily mistaken him for a big wolf. He was huge. Fresh cornbread had been placed on the windowsill to cool. Oh, and how wonderful it smelled. He licked his lips and continued to sniff. Drool started to drip from his mouth as he anticipated the taste. He sat up to get closer. Perhaps he could even taste it. Or better still, he could eat it. Finally, Sonia gasped and she ran over to him. "No!" she whispered harshly. "Get down! Bad boy!" The coyote quickly got down and cowered with confusion. He hadn't been approached before. However, after a moment, he regained his confidence, untucked his tail, and began to wag it as he watched and waited for something from her. He needed some sort of sign of her intentions before he could be certain how to react. "No," she repeated. "You can't have that." The coyote shuffled his feet and came closer to her. He showed no signs of aggression, so Sonia felt herself relax a little. He came right up to her, and he began to sniff and nuzzle at the pocket of her frock. Sonia was rather startled and confused at first, but she then remembered that she had some bread in her pockets from that morning. She pulled it out, still wrapped in a cloth napkin. The coyote panted in a way that looked like a smile. He sat down obediently and pawed at the air in a beckoning sort of motion. The coyote's left paw, the one with which he beckoned, seemed odd, as if he himself were not odd as it already stood. However, about his left paw, like a jagged bracelet, was a very visible scar. It appeared to be an old injury, and likely had some sort of tail behind it. It looked almost as if his paw had been caught in a bear trap. Escaping with the paw still attached would have been a real accomplishment, and likely a painful one. However, it had healed, and it didn't seem to bother him in the least. He was likely not even aware the remnant of his misfortune was even still present. Sonia held up the bread. He sat up. She couldn't help but smile. It was as if he had been domesticated and trained at some point. However, he was so obviously a wild beast. Who, in their right mind, would take in a coyote, let alone a coyote like this one? Carefully, she held out the bread for him. Rather than snap it from her hand, he took it gently from her fingers. He was quite a mannerly beast. At least, he was mannerly when it came to plucking the bread from her. He practically swallowed it whole as he gobbled it up, once he had it to himself. He then glanced back up at her as he wagged his tail. "Now go!" she urged in a highly animated fashion. "Get lost before someone sees you!" He let out a whine and cocked his head to the side. After a moment of considering her actions, he was up and running off towards the woods. Sonia was then left alone with the remainder of the wet laundry. She was sure that he was the coyote from the previous night. Yet he seemed far less menacing this time. However, what was he doing there in the first place? The square was busy that afternoon. Aunt Esther needed some things from the market to prepare for the night's supper. Of course, she sent Sonia with the list and the basket. The best time to go to the market was in the morning. However, sometimes it just couldn't be helped. Delicious tomatoes sat on one of the vending tables. They shined in the afternoon sun. Sonia chose the best two, and she placed them into her basket. It was true that her family's farm had its own crops and livestock, but their harvest had not yet been completed, and they just couldn't maintain everything. The specialties of neighboring farms supplemented their needs as their specialties supplemented the needs of others. It was Uncle Homer that specialized in the livestock. It was Aunt Esther that had an undying love for the hobby of gardening. A loud whinny screamed across the square. It came upon all ears and called all eyes to rise in investigation. On hard dirt came clopping heavy hoofs of a large milk chocolate stallion. He stepped high, as if in a majestic march. He salivated, as he seemed to disagree with his bridle. His tone and conformation were perfect. He was pure, solid muscle, and his mane and tail flowed like the water off a duck's back. A horse like that could only belong to the wealthiest of Turn's villagers. And he did. Upon the intricate saddle, feet firmly in the stirrups, sat an equally intricately dressed man. He was from a line of self-proclaimed nobility. He wore a fancy tunic of fancy colors, as if a peacock above the world. His hat even had a grand golden pheasant-tail feather. Yes, he was a peacock, complete with plumage. He had a large hooked nose and small pinched lips. His eyes were a bit squinted, as if the sight of the mere common man and filthy mongers that created the base and foundation of the very lavish lifestyle he held repulsed him. Not specks of dirt or a stain dare rest upon him. His olive-green tights appeared beneath his garment and vanished into shining, upturned boots. How he held his toes in such a position so casually was a true mystery. Surely it could not have been comfortable, but perhaps an explanation for his snippy attitude. "Little Miss Sonia, I presume?" He spoke in a voice of a higher pitch. It was as if he spoke in a nasal tone and squeezed the air from his larynx rather than letting it flow. Perhaps it was because he spoke through that banana-shaped honker on his face. "Yes, sir, Lord Grundle," she replied with a polite curtsy. Lord Grundle, indeed. What makes him so great that he should be treated as nobility? Or worse, he considers himself a prince among the people of Turn, while he refuses to lay a finger to help keep the village alive. "Is there something that I can do for you?" "Oh, no, my dear. We just don't see you very often within the village fence. I was beginning to think that perhaps you were a wild child." "No, sir," she replied, ignoring the condescending message behind such a statement. "I'm just seeking shade and pure virgin tranquility." "Yes," he groaned. "I suppose you could find that out there. Do be careful and mindful, Miss Sonia. Out there, you are not protected like you are within Turn. I'd hate to have to send word to your aunt and uncle that you had been taken by bandits, or those woodland devils. After all, your dear uncle took it so hard when your mother passed away so prematurely." "Woodland devils," Sonia muttered. He was being somewhat discreet, yet obviously scolding her. Lord Grundle sure seemed awfully full of himself. When the Grundles came into the picture, Turn had turned completely upside down. His ancestors brought the new religion to the village, and he felt that the village belonged to him. It was as if they owed him their lives for being part of the bloodline that saved them from the old ways. It took a very prideful man to feel that he and his bloodline was the personal mouthpiece of God. Personally, Sonia felt that he was a stuck-up and annoying snob. However, he held all of the power of the village. Still, she couldn't help but think ill, even now in his presence. The old ways were gone from this place, but in their heyday was the tension and climate between the people of Turn once more relaxed. A loud whistle sounded as two men made their way to the square. They were returning from chopping timber. In Turn, a lumberjack was a very dangerous job that paid well with grand benefits. After all, they had to be out in the dangerous woods, face to face with the woodland devils. The lumberjacks carried a rod between them. No wood had they brought, but a kill. It was a battered, tattered, gray and fierce specimen of Coyote. Laying flat against her body were sagging nipples. This Coyote was a female, and she had a litter of pups somewhere. Sonia couldn't help but frown. The lumberjacks had obviously beaten her to death. "That's horrible," she found herself crying out. "That it is, Miss Sonia," Lord Grundle said flatly. "That is a woodland devil, if I had ever seen one." "We saw it creeping through the bushes," one of the lumberjacks stated, "so we chased her down." "It's a mother coyote," Sonia insisted. "So it is," Lord Grundle replied. "That's good." "What?" "With the mother gone, the pups will die soon, with no one to care for them. God's justice, that's what it is. He shall smite those woodland devils and give them what they deserve. The males are devils enough, but the females birth more. The more females that are destroyed, the less the males can reproduce." Sonia covered her mouth as the lumberjacks continued by. She watched as the dead bodies swayed with every step they took. The long pink tongue fell free from the narrow muzzle, as if it were to add insult to injury. "Lord Grundle, is not a coyote a creature of God as well?" she cried. He replied with an amused chuckle. "My dear, of course not. The coyote has proven itself to be a devil, and to serve him so readily. Just as snakes, bats, and poisonous beasts, the coyote has earned a place in the animals of the wicked. You see, that's why pagans worship them so. If they were appeased, they spared their stupid, savage little lives. They are in league with the Dark One. Savages and pagans are against God. That is why they were so angry when the pagans of turn became God-fearing sheep of his mighty herd." "How can that be?" "For decades, Miss Sonia, the coyotes have raided the farms of turn. Livestock have been taken, even lives of men, women, and children have been taken, even within our own gates. Men have ventured into those woods, and none have ever been seen alive again. Coyotes got them. Coyotes used to run rampant within turn. However, my great-great-grandfather saved this village from the devils that claimed it. Satan became enraged by it. He came in the form of a coyote to punish the people of Turn for betraying him and turning to the powers of God. The people, free from his evil influence, slain the beast and drove the evil out. The woodland devils remember. Devil after devil knows, Miss Sonia. They will not relent unless the people of Turn return to them, or else be destroyed. Every last one." Sonia had to bite her tongue. It sounded like radical lunacy to her, yet also a repeated lesson among the people of Turn. However, she could feel his eyes burning into her. It was as if he was daring her to question his supreme authority. He said nothing, and he didn't have to. She knew what the eyes were for. History. It was all history, never forgotten, and only barely forgiven. For that, she grew both nervous and angry. Still, no good would come of speaking further on the matter. Besides, she still had shopping left to do. If she didn't return in a timely manner, Aunt Esther would grow quite cross.